Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Pajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Pajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Padavijacharya Ashtotra Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Padavijacharya Ashtotra Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktavinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Narayam Namaskritya Narang Chaiv Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire. Before reciting this Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and to Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta prayesha bandreshu nityam bhagavata seveya bhagavatuttama shloke Bhakti bhavati naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil. And loving devotional service to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 19th day of September 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in Canto 6, Prescribed Duties for Mankind, Chapter 1, The History of the Life of a Jamil, text number 10. Question: Nivartate abhadrat kvachit charati tat punaha prayaschittam ato apartam manye kunjarasauchavat. Kvachin nivartate abhadrat kvachit charati tat punaha prayaschittam ato apartam manye kunjata sauchavat. Kvachin nivartate badrat kvachit charati tat punaha prayaschittam ato apartam manye kunjata sauchavat. Kvachin nivartate bhadrat kvachit charati tat punaha prayaschittam ato apartam manye kunjata sauchavat. Kvachin nivartate bhadrat kvachit charati tat punaha prayaschittam ato apartam manye kunjata sauchavat. Kvachin nivartate badrat kvachit charati tat punaha prayaschittam ato apartam manye kunjata sauchavat. Kvachin nivartate badrat kvachit charati tat punaha prayaschittam ato apartam manye kunjata sauchavat. Kvachin nivartate badrat. You got your eyes, you get this here, and then when the combination is not going to be accurate. Let's suspend it. Anyone online? You want to strive? Kvachin nivartate badrat kvachit charati tat punaha prayaschittam ato apartam manye kunjata sauchavat. Krishna can understand. Anyone online? Okay. Kvachit, sometimes. Nivartate, ceases. Abhadrat, from sinful activity. Charati, kvachit, sometimes. Charati, commits. Tat, that sinful activity. Punaha, again. Prayaschittam, the process of atonement. Ato, therefore. Apartam, useless. Manye, I consider. Kunjara Shauchavat, exactly like the bathing of an elephant. Govardhan, turn this down a little bit for me. Thanks. Translation. Sometimes one who is very alert so as not to commit sinful acts is victimized by sinful life again. I therefore consider this process of repeated sinning and atoning to be useless. It is like the bathing of an elephant. For an elephant cleanses itself by taking a full bath, but then throws dust over its head and body as soon as it returns to the land. Purport. When Pariksit Maharaja inquired how a human being could free himself from sinful activities so as not to be forced to go to hellish planetary systems after death, Shukadeva Goswami answered that the process of counteracting sinful life is atonement. In this way, Shukadeva Goswami tested the intelligence of Maharaj Pariksit, who passed the examination by refusing to accept this process as genuine. Now Pariksit Maharaj is expecting another answer from his spiritual master, Shukadeva Goswami. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnanandana Salakaya Chakshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Sapadhantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalang Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagvajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Padijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padang Sahagana Ladita Shri Vishakhan Vitangstra. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you. So one note about Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi. All of the I's at the end of the words there are short because it's vocative. You're addressing Radharani directly. So it's not Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari. That's usually when it's third person. But here's Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari. Just one note on that. So, this is a famous verse, especially this last line. If you can just remember that, you can use it in preaching. Manye kunjara shochavat. I think it's just like an elephant's bathing. So atonement, now the word, think about it, atonement means at one-ment. To get at one with God means to reconcile with God by performing some kind of process, tapasya, whatever it is, to counteract your sins. But the process of atonement, even in the Vedic culture, really doesn't make you at one with God. And it's just a kind of a technical process by which you can, instead of suffering the sinful reactions and thus becoming one and thus paying for your sins, you can do some kind of austerity or program to nullify them. But the problem is, as we've heard many times before at this point, is that it doesn't root out the desire to commit the sin. It may bring you back to point zero, but then right away you're going back into the minus area again because you've still got the tendency. And this is a process that is there even for people who are just trying to benefit themselves by giving up alcohol or losing weight or whatever it is. They've gotten it. They've habituated or conditioned their body and their mind to experience a certain pleasure, whether it's drinking alcohol, taking drugs, eating junk food, you know, and lying around watching TV or whatever it is, so that you get overweight and it's dangerous to your health. But those are all addictive processes. They're addictive. In other words, it's right from the 3rd chapter, right? Indriyani mano buddhi dasyadistanamuchite etava mohajaja kama rupam darasadam. That lust or strong material desire, what is it? What causes it? Well, we know dhyayato vishayan pungsa is that you come into this world in a conditioned state, and your senses are programmed to be attracted to certain objects of the senses. Primarily the opposite sex, but there's a whole other bunch of them also. So, and then it's harmful. It's harmful to engage in unlimited illicit sex. Obviously, there's so many diseases, you weaken the body, you cause so much emotional distress for yourself and others, it can ruin your family, there's a million different things. And yet, still, people do it, because the kama covers your knowledge. Avitam jnanametena, jnanino nityavaidinam. Such an important section of the Bhagavad Gita. When you yield to these urges, vatro vegam, manasakroga vegam, then you plant the desire seed in your mind and your heart, and it affects your ability to employ the intelligence to restrain yourself from that very thing. This is what happens. And it can happen on the gross level, it can happen on the subtle level too. You don't hear it so much anymore, but there's this idea of codependence. People get into a codependent relationship. In other words, they're addicted to each other, more than just sex, you know, for all kinds of things, you know, for support and this and that, you know, that. And that can be also, it's certainly damaging to any spiritual endeavor, because the whole idea of Krishna consciousness is to turn your attention from the material to the spiritual, which is very difficult because we're so covered we can't perceive the spiritual directly. As Krishna says, for many people, even hearing about the soul, I don't see any evidence of the soul. What is this soul, you know? And even hearing about it, they think it's amazing. They think it's unbelievable. What to speak of the Supreme Soul? Most people today, vast majority, are covered by the modes of passion and ignorance, which means they're more and more controlled by the lower self. Mode of ignorance, you're practically like an animal. You know, the more that someone is really aspiring for immediate sense gratification, forgetting about long-term problems or anything, the more that you're on the animal level. When you think of it, animals don't like really plan ahead, you know. They don't regret things they did before. They more or less live in the moment. I'm hungry, I gotta go find something. And they're programmed, you know, they're by instinct. The super souls giving them, go here, go there, you know. Oh, there's danger. Okay, out come the teeth and the claws, or the flight or flight, you know, that whole thing. The birds. Prabhupada points out the birds. I remember I grew up in an apartment building where there were a lot of robins in those days. You don't see it anymore, at least not in this environment. And a certain time of the year, the springtime, you'd see them, and they'd be on the ground, and they'd be picking, looking for seeds, you know, that planted or that fell from the trees or something like that. You know, that was how they got their food. But they'd always be nervous. You know, a cat may be coming, you know, with danger, you know. And as soon as there's even a danger, boom, they're up in the tree. We had a whole bunch of big trees that were growing in this area. So that's the nature of material life, is to be controlled by the material energy, but then to always wonder about the danger. How is this going to end? You know, so this fear is the aspect. And so then you have Sukadeva Goswami right at the beginning of the second canto. He analyzes the life of a materialist in 2 or 3 verses. It's very cogent, you know, summary. Bhagavatam is so concise in many places, you know. So what's the analysis? It says, well, nidriya hriyate naktam vibhayena cha bhavayak divacharte rajan kutumba baranenava. At nighttime, wasting time. Too much sleep or sex life. During the day, where's money, where's money, where's money? And then in the weekend, spending it shopping, you know, supporting the kutumba. Kutumba is the children, the whole thing you have to support. That's the life. And now, this is a tenuous situation. The rent could go up, and I won't be able to pay the rent. I might get ill. Okay, got to get insurance. It's not such a good neighborhood. We have to be careful when we walk. I'll get some little spray or something. What do they call it? What is it called? Pepper spray, or there's a million different things to worry about. What about my kids? Who are they associating with? Oh my God, there's another worry. There's all these worries. So you have. He summarizes. You have your soldiers to protect you from all these dangers. First thing is a strong body. If you're intelligent, you keep your body strong, fit, go work out, And then nowadays, of course, arms, you can add, to make your body stronger. You carry weapons with you. And then, so that's deha. Then you have apatya, which is the sons in your family. In a civilized civilization, you'll have an extended family. You're not just living 2 people and 1 kid, the nuclear family, and then the parents break up, and what happens to the kid, No, you have your wife and your family and your sons and your cousins and your in-laws, you've got one big family and you're taking care of each other. In India, you still have families like that. So that's called your apatya. It begins with the children and the wife, kalatra, and extends to the others. And then he said adishu, means etc. You can expand it. And so he says, Deha patakadadarishu atmasainyeshu. These are your soldiers to protect yourself, which most people is the body. Atma can mean also the body. But he says, asatsu. They're fallible soldiers. Just as your grandfather or great-grandfather has died, someone at one point took shelter of him, and he was, he had his children and everything, but he died. And these people are also going to die, or the children, they don't want to hang around. They go away. They're not taking care of you anymore. A million different things. So asatsu api, even though one sees pashyati, pashyat deha patakara atmasanya tesham pamato nidadam pashyan. Even though one has seen or understands logically that these are fallible soldiers, they're not for sure that they can protect me. And they also get destroyed. But even though see them, pamatta, one is mad, forgetful, that you still doesn't see. This wonderful phrase in Sanskrit, pashyana being the pashyati. See, although seeing, they don't see. Although it's obvious that this material life is untenable, it can't go on for long. You still forget about death, you forget about old age. I'm just living in the moment. That's the mode of ignorance, you see. So this is the problem. And in the course of doing that, because of ignorance, you're committing so many sins and ensuring a life in one of those hells we read about. So what have you done? You enjoyed a little bit of flickering happiness. You developed a shell of indifference so that you become cruel, certainly to the poor animals who you're eating. That's out of complete ignorance. So you're paving a way for extreme suffering. Not just birth, old age, disease, and death, which is bad enough, but this hellish life that we read about. These different hells. And which Maharaj Pariksit, having heard, wants to know how can people be saved. So the first answer is a test. It's an atonement. In other words, you can neutralize whatever sins you perform by these austerities and certain things in the Manosamhita like that. It's possible. But that doesn't get rid of the desire to perform the sin. So you're still on the side of danger, being victimized by your own body and mind and senses, which become saturated with desire, lust for all these different things. So what's the point? You see, it's not going to work. So in Bhakti Yoga, this comes in right in the second chapter. Vishayavani vartante niraharasya dehinak. That the vishayas, the objects of the senses, which is generally through which you perform sinful activity, one can give them up by force of will. Vishayavani vartante niraharasya. You don't have to consume them. You understand by that this is bad for me. AA, we have the Alcoholics Anonymous up the street here, a major center of it. I tell you, I went up there, not because I'm an alcoholic, but there was a guy who came here was an alcoholic. He was brought here by the son of your friend, Adikarta. You know he's had problems. Yeah. So he had a problem with alcohol. He grew up in the Gurukul and got involved. So he sent him here because we were friends, and he thought he would get some good association, and he would come and I would preach to him like that. But he was also going to AA. So he met this guy and he told him what he was into, Hare Krishna. He said, oh, I'd like to hear about that. So he came down and he started coming to classes. He showed up a few months ago. I'll tell you about that after many years. So what is AA? You know, I mean, it's people getting together because they have a problem. The problem is they're an alcoholic. That's part of what I'm John Smith and I'm an alcoholic. You know, you have to like do a confession. You know, I don't know. You know about that. Not personally, but you just know. So anyway, he would bring him down here and he would listen to class. But the poor guy, he was in there. I don't know if he was in there for alcohol, but he was in there for drugs. He had become a cocaine addict. This other guy, I forget his name now, Daniel or something. And he would listen to my class. He liked my classes, but he could only stay for like 10 minutes. His mind was so messed up and restless from the cocaine. He'd have to get up and walk outside and come back. You remember, you were here. So eventually he invited me to come up there to address the group, you know. So usually when you speak, you get up there, my name is Dravida Dasa and I'm an alcoholic. Well, I wasn't about to do that. They give you these tokens, you know, if you're like 6 months, 2 years, and you say, oh, I have my, 2 years clean, dry, you know. So I have to be, okay, I have 45 years dry, because I used to drink when I was 18. I used to drink some beer. I didn't get too much into it. Anyway. But I gave a talk, and because he had given me a book, and I read some, and I saw there's some parallels here. You know, first of all, coming together for strength, to get strength. And it's non-sectarian, so recognizing a higher power, that's as far as they go, you know, it's not this God or that God, you know, which is obviously everything. And having to be determined, you know, but the main thing is getting strength and also the confessing and all this stuff. So there was some parallels that I mentioned them. But the point is that without getting the higher taste, that's what this verse said, Vishayava Nivartante, is that you may give up alcohol or whatever it is that's troubling you. But the desire is still there. Every alcoholic knows it, right? And that if they say, all my friends are in the bar I used to go to, I'll go there, but I won't drink anything. Yeah, right. In the atmosphere and the smell and everything, and just one won't hurt before you, I'm off the wagon. They fell off the wagon, right? So what this verse says, very tellingly, is that you can give up those things by force of will for some time, but the taste remains. Exactly what's talking about here. Rasa varjam, but rasa vyasya, padam drishtra navartate. If you get the higher taste, padam drishtra means literally to see the Supreme, to experience Krishna consciousness. Nivartate, this is in the verse here, isn't it? Kvachin nivartate, ceases. Even the rasa ceases, even the taste for it ceases. And what's the perfect example? Prabhupada quotes this verse twice in the purport. You know this one. Yadavarima macheta Krishna padadavinde navanavanasadhama nyuditam vrantamasid tadavadibadanadi sangame smayamane bhavati mukhavikaru sustinishtimanancha. Prabhupada says that when I think of sex, I spite on it. So who is speaking this? This is Yamunacharya. The Yamunacharya, who was a great scholar, a devotee as a young man. I think you told the story once. Yeah, I didn't know that backstory. And he was a great, incredible intellect and known for his debates. This is what they did. A child. I figure he's like 14, 15 years old. And so the king had a court Brahmin who was known to be a tremendous scholar and who had conquered so many, just like the Digvijay in Lord Chaitanya's Leela, Kashmir, Keshava Kashmir. So he was very proud of that, and the king was proud of him too, So Yamunacharya, as a boy, he comes in, he wants to debate him, and everyone says, "Oh, fuck, you don't have a chance. This is absurd. You're just a child." So I still want to debate him. So the king said, "Well, okay, if you win the debate, you can have half my kingdom." This is showing how sure he was that his court jester, court pundit would win. I forget. Do you forget? You remember the questions? What was it? Use the mic.
No, he has to refute. He has to.
Yes, refute some statements.
The queen said, and if he loses, I'll become the servant of my maidservant.
Wow.
So she said that also. She had such confidence in him. So there was three things that had to be refuted. One, the queen is unchaste. Refute that if you can. The king is sinful. Refute that. And your mother is barren.
In other words, there are riddles that seem like, well, like, you know. And
Do you want me to continue?
Yeah.
Okay, so the
Court pundit.
The court pundit said, well, this is ridiculous. You're being offensive. The queen is unchaste. What is this? He should be killed. You know, there's nonsense. So the young man, I think he was like young, like 12 or something.
Maybe 12.
13, something. He was young. He said, okay, you can refute it. I'll refute it. The queen is unchaste because it's described in Shastra that the king is the representative of all the demigods. So that means she's also the wife of all the demigods. How can she be chaste? And the queen said, yes, this is true. It's in Shastra. And then he said, your mother is barren because it's stated that if a mother has only one child, then it's considered barren because mothers want to have so many children. If there's only one child, it's stated in Shastra, barren. And the king is sinful because he accepts 1/6 of all the sins of everyone in the kingdom. So he's sinful. So then it's in Shastra. He got half the kingdom, but he's just a kid. He's just a 12 or 13-year-old kid. He got half the kingdom and half the army. So many other kingdoms, they wanted to come and defeat him, but he had the army. He was sharp. That was up till he was 30. I think he was 38.
Wow.
When one of his
So that part I remember.
Yeah.
So his he had this kingdom, and you know, he's just a kid, so he got into it. Obviously, you know, he had the harem, and so he had all the opportunities for sense gratification. He wasn't sinful, but he was just doing the king thing, and so he had so many friends. He was in the ashram of the guru, and he was known as a wonderful devotee and very learned, you know. So after all this time, they figured, well, maybe we'll try to save him, you know, or something, you know. So they sent one of his old friends there, and he said, oh, you know, so Das, you know, come on in, you know. And so he was welcomed into the, and then so the friend said, well, let's go for a walk, you know. And he had so many wonderful gardens you can imagine. So he's walking. So as he's walking, he's reminding him of all these old nectar shlokas that he used to know, right? And I said, oh, that's such a nice one, you know. You remember from like Bismarck's prayers in the Bhagavatam or Kunti's prayers or whatever. So he's remembering all these verses, and as he's doing that, his whole previous consciousness, Krishna consciousness, is awakening. And in that process of taking that walk, he's losing the desire. He says, oh, I've really fallen away. You know, he just keeps walking. He walked right out of the kingdom, gave it up, took sannyas right there. And then he became Yamunacharya, and then he became the spiritual master of Ramanujacharya. So he wrote this verse. He also wrote a wonderful book called Stotra Ratna, which Srila Prabhupada would often quote from, especially one verse. So what does this verse says? It says, Yadavadi mamacheta Krishna padadavinde. So ever since I've been Yadavadi Krishna padadavinde navanama rasamadi yuntadam rantamasi. Ever since I have been tasting ever new rasa, pleasure, by serving the lotus feet of Krishna. Then Tadavadi, since then, whenever I remember my sex with a woman, basically he says, and you know, in the palace, his lips curl in distaste and he spits at the thought. So there's no question of someone like that who has that kind of distaste falling back again into it. And we can relate to that. I mean, you know, you've heard it so many times. I told you, I remember when McDonald's was founded, you know, in the early 60s. I remember when they suddenly was at McDonald's. And I would go there regularly. You know, cheeseburgers and fries and this and that. You know, this was bowling night. I would go there. So I had a taste, and I was trained as a regular meat-eating kid, you know. So I didn't think twice about it. And I would be disappointed if you know, there was some meal served. We used to eat dinner together. The family still did that, you know. And I said, okay, here's the vegetable. Where's the meat, Mom? You know, that's the real essence of it. So I was just a regular kid. But, you know, after I became a vegetarian before I joined, but I wasn't, you know, religiously. I mean, I easily could have fallen back from that. But then when I joined Hare Krishna, and I prasadam and the whole thing, and, you know, his souls and his suffering, I said, oh, wow. That's why when I was first served chicken as a kid, I said, oh, no, because you could see the bird, you know. I said, oh, that used to be a bird. I didn't want to eat it. It was a natural thing. And after a while, you get accustomed, you didn't think twice. You know, the hamburgers, you didn't see the cow. You didn't even know it. Anyway, it's a whole thing. But now there's no question. There's not even the smidgen of desire for it left. You know, and because of you know, the whole philosophy, and it's gone. And so is the desire for. I used to drink beers, you know, smoke marijuana a little bit. It's completely gone. No one could induce me to do that. You know. So the point is that Krishna consciousness sublimates the desire. It purifies it. When we talk about purifying the heart, that's the first installment, really, is that you're purified. You're developing an attachment, you're developing an attraction to Krishna and everything related to Krishna. The people, the devotees, you know, the deities, the holy name, the prasadam, the philosophy, everything. That's Krishna's grace. That's coming from Krishna. That's coming right from the heart. That's what it means, the heart, that your desires are being purified, your mind is being purified. So that will be you know, emphasized here. The holy name is the prime means to do that, in this age especially. It's chanting the holy name. And what happened with the Jamil, as we'll read, very dramatic. You know, he was fallen. He fell from his Brahminical standard, obviously. You know, we know that, the story. We'll hear about it in detail. And he became completely covered over. He was just a rogue and a rascal, you know. He was like Jagai Madai, you know, performing all kinds of illicit activities and illicit sex, everything, you know. But he remembered enough, you know, to name at least his youngest son, Narayan. I think there's somewhere where I read that all of his children, but at least the youngest son. And so that saved him, because he called out his name at the time of death, and there's some, you know, he was thinking of his son, but he was reminded of Narayan, whatever. But it was he wasn't chanting in order to counteract his sins, you know. He was chanting out of pure desperation, and therefore, because of that, and because the name of Narayan, he got a second chance. That's the whole point. That's, you know, that name of that book that was put together. And so, what did he do with that second chance? You know, he didn't die, obviously. But he did take sannyas. He got out of that bed, he went up to the Himalayas, Bhadrak Ashram or somewhere, and he continued to perform, you know, bhakti yoga, and then eventually the same Vaikuntha representatives came back and took him back to Godhead. So the holy name, the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, is the foundation of this whole movement. This is why Lord Chaitanya, he emphasized it. Because in this age, people can't hardly understand the philosophy, they have weak will, they don't live very long. There's a whole bunch of, a great list in the 12th canto. There's also a summary verse in the first canto, like right at the beginning, Prayanam Vayashaksabhya. They don't live very long. Manda, they're lazy or, you know, non-existent desire in the matter of spiritual things. And if they happen to have some interest, manda matayo, they're misguided. And therefore, mandabhaga, they're very unfortunate. And because of this, the mind is always disturbed. So how are they going to sit for meditation or understand deep philosophy, you know? Get them to chant. And this was Prabhupada's great vision, you know. He said he's following Lord Chaitanya. He began with the chanting, ended with the chanting. When he would have his programs, you know, it was kirtan, long kirtan, an hour, you know. And people would hear, and many would chant, and soon he had attracted some musicians, you know, they're playing the drum. Mukunda Bhakti Mike was playing the drum. And it was attractive and purifying. And then after the kirtan, you're a little bit more receptive to hear. Oh, what is this feeling? What is it I've been experiencing? You know, from inside, Krishna is giving you a desire to hear. And so you're hearing the Prabhupada would give the lecture. And afterward, more kirtan and prasadam. It's the format of the Sunday feast, really, you know. And that, you know, it worked. It worked. He was able to attract young, you know, hedonists, basically. That was a hippie, basically hedonist with a little philosophy, you know. And to take part, and because of him personally, and because therefore the holy name became central to their lives. They became committed to chanting. They enjoyed kirtan, and it's off and running. And so Prabhupada proved, you know, what Lord Chaitanya proved, of course, is that he you know, was able to purify anybody, Jagai Madai, of course. But the same process still works all over the world, anywhere in the world. Human beings, any human beings. So that's why this chapter and this whole episode of Jamil is so critical for us and for understanding this is our situation. And in the purport, Prabhupada makes it very clear. At one point he says, the members of the Hare Krishna movement should always remember where they came from, that they were in a similar situation with the Jamil and Jagai Madai. And they should be determined not to fall back into that state, because it's also possible to deviate. The problem is that the tendency to commit offenses through inattention or through lack of sadhana and, you know, not understanding, ignorance. And those offenses, what is the first effect? I mean, I've witnessed this over the years with so many devotees, is that you're uncomfortable among the devotees. By committing offenses against the holy name, you're more likely to commit offense against devotees, because you're not tasting and getting the higher taste. If you're actually getting the higher taste in kirtan and din and preaching and everything, you'll be so tolerant. If something happens, you know, you're not going to retaliate and create a big fuss. You know, you tolerate because you're getting the higher taste. But if you're not getting the higher taste from Krishna, then you're more likely to be controlled by your lower self, by the modes. And then you seriously offend the devotee, verbally or even physically. I've seen that. Then you become unable to associate with the devotees. I saw this one devotee. He had been a leading devotee. Look at the name names, of course. This was in LA back in the 70s, and I don't know what he was doing, but I was standing right behind him, and Rukmini Dwarkadish were there, all attractive, you know, kirtan. And he was standing right in front of the deities, right in front of me. And I was looking at him, and he wasn't looking at the deities. He couldn't look at those deities because of something that he'd done. I don't know what he'd done, broke the regs or something, you know. That's scary. But that's a perfect example of what happens. You know, oh, you sleep in, you know, okay, you know, and before you know it, you have something else to do, and your mind is out, you know. This is Krishna. You know, this is why we came to this material world. We reenact the fall. Bhakta Saul, hey, Hare Krishna. We reenact the fall from the spiritual world every day, because we're not completely absorbed in Krishna. We're chanting with great attention, but as soon as we decide, you know, or we let our mind wander, we're turning our back on Krishna. And we're back thinking about the material energy in some sort, you know. So that's the fall. We've been fallen ever since, and completely under the spell. I love that Prabhupada's phrase, you know, under the spell of the material energy. So we should be very serious and vigilant, not to let ourselves fall away again into the spell, because it's you know, to prolong our life, you know, our sojourn in this material world. It's spiritual suicide. Nivrittatarshaya rupagiyamanan babashadatrota manobiraman kauttama shloka gunanavadat pumamvarajeta vina pashugnat. This is practically the beginning of the 10th canto. King Pariksit is asking Shukadev, now please describe these wonderful, attractive pastimes of Krishna. Now we've led up to the end of the 9th canto. And he gives a wonderful verse, which Srila Prabhupada quotes in the preface, I think it is, or introduction to the Krishna book. It's one of the few verses quoted in the Krishna book, maybe the only verse. And what he says there is that the medicine for curing birth and death, bhavaushadhi, very dramatic, is your katha spoken by those who are free from material desire, in other words, pure devotees. Nivritta tarsha means when your thirst for material life is finished. This is describing the great devotees. Upagiyamanad, they're singing them, they're glorifying, as Prabhupada did constantly, Bhavaushadhat, shrota mano, and it's not a bitter medicine, it's very delightful for the ear and for the mind. Shrota and mana abhiramat. So who would give it up? Who would not take this medicine and get out of this world of birth and death and so much suffering? Ka uttama shloka. And this word uttama shloka is a name for Krishna. He was glorified in the best of verses, poems. Gunanavadat, the description of his qualities, etc. Who would give it up except Puman Virajeta? Viraja means to give up. Puran Virajeta Vina Pashugnat. No one except one who is Pashugnat. Now, Pashugnat has two meanings. One who eats meat. Generally cannot become attracted to Krishna Katha. It's very difficult. And one who is killing his own soul. In other words, you can't kill the soul, but in other words, killing his spiritual life voluntarily, taking poison, So that is a wonderful verse at the beginning. Who would be attracted to these pastimes? One who is serious, who is not killing his own self, but trying to bring the real self out. As devotee of Krishna, we revive our original Krishna consciousness, and of course following the four regs, which includes no meat eating. So that's what will come out here, that it's holy name, and when we get the wonderful lesson, each of the Mahajans comes on the stage, so to speak, except for Janaka. We don't hear anything from him. But, and has a certain lesson that they give. Brahma comes in all the time, several places. Narada, every canto, And Prahlad, of course, has his whole wonderful section in the 7th canto, wonderful teachings, and each of the Kumaras, all of them. And Yamaraj's main discourse, his main lesson comes in this 6th canto, in the 1st or 2nd chapter, I think 2nd chapter somewhere. All, about the power of the holy name. He warns his dutas, don't go near anyone who's chanting the holy name of Krishna, whatever you do, And then he has a summary verse, Etavan evalokesmin pungsang dharma paraksvidaha bhakti yoga bhagavati tunama guhananivi. What he's saying is this Etavan verse. You can look for them in the Bhagavatam. They're almost all of them very, very important. Etavan evalokesmin pungsang dharma paraksvidaha. What is the supreme dharma? The supreme dharma for the living beings in this world. Evalokesmin dharma. Bhakti yoga bhagavati. Is bhakti yoga, devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Tannamaga Hanadibi, beginning with the chanting of the holy name. Practically, that's the mission statement of this whole movement, Lord Chaitanya. That's why it says he came to preach the Bhagavatam. What is that verse? Aradyo Bhagavan Rajesh Tanayas Taddama Vrindavanam Ramya Kachadupasana Vrijapadu Bhagena Yakalbita Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanamamalam Prema Pumato Mahan. Prema Pumato Mahan. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Matam Tatvadara Napara. I don't know anything else but these teachings of Lord Chaitanya. This is the essence of it. One should worship Bhagavan. Who is that Bhagavan? Vrajesha Tanaya, the son of the king of Braja, Krishna, the son of Nanda Maharaj. And to Dhamma, also worship is Dhamma, Vrindavan. How should one worship? Ramya Kachadupasana Vajavadu Bhagena Kalpita. Just as the gopis did. That's the highest model for worship. Completely selfless. What's the evidence for all this? Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanamamalam. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the supreme evidence for all of this, for the teaching of Lord Chaitanya. He came to fulfill that. And what's the final goal? Prema Pamato Mahat. That the love of God is the highest goal for human life. And they said, these are the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and I don't know anything beyond that. This is a verse from the Chaitanya Mandusha, Prabhupada would often quote. So that's, we're hearing an essential part of the teaching here. The importance of the holy name, especially in this age, the power of the holy name, and the wonderful mercy of the holy name. You know, to forgive you for all the sins you've ever committed, you can imagine. I mean, you don't even want to think about it. But those are weighing us down and keeping us bound in this world. And so by chanting seriously, you get free from that, you can stay free from it, and develop the real goal, which is not just liberation, but prema, which includes, of course, liberation from birth and death. So I'll leave it at that. If anyone has any questions or comments, we can entertain them at this time, either local or remote. Govardhan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Dravida.
Hare Krishna.
Like you said, we were all raised eating meat and we didn't even think twice about it. I remember I was eating a burger and I took the buns off, and then the meat, I saw like the blood vessels and the arteries, and I was thinking, like, I was pretty grossed out, but I didn't know any better, so I just ate it. But in the back of my head, I was thinking, man, that was so gross. You know.
And that's how it all started.
Yeah. You know, yeah.
And then when someone offered you a higher taste about vegetarianism, yeah, maybe I'll check that out.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm so glad that I'm not attracted to that, you know, type of food anymore. Yeah. And the second thing is, I was distributing books at Balboa Park yesterday, and I met this old man. He was saying, I'm at the prime of my life, you know, and I asked him, how old are you? He said, I'm 68. He was 68, and then I said, you know, have you thought about your future, you know, about death? And he said, oh, I don't want to think about that. And then he said, I went to the doctor, they said I have a heart rate of, you know, 45-year-old, as long as I'm continuing to do what I'm doing, you know, and I'm a good person like that. And I told him, why wouldn't you want to think about death? And then he said, oh, I just don't want to think about it. So, and then, because you were saying living in the moment is in the mode of ignorance.
Yes, yes. Prabhupada said that the more you're in the mode of ignorance, the more you're thinking about the immediate pleasures, immediate dangers. You know, you're not, you know, thinking in the future, and that's why you find Krishna's first lesson. Hey, dehinos minyata dehe. Nobody dies. Your future is like millions and millions of years. It's not just 10, 20, 30 years. You know, that's what you should be thinking about. You know.
That poem by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says, forget the past that sleeps, nor the future dream at all. Live in times that are with thee, and progress thee shall call. In other words, live with the moment.
Yeah, but that's but that you have to go the rest of the poem. In other words, don't let yourself get weighed down by, you know, your sins, and don't freak out at the future. But take advantage of the moment. The idea is that the whole point of that was don't waste time. In other words, chant Hare Krishna and investigate that. So there's a different perspective there. You're right that it sounds like it's contradictory, but that's not what he's talking about. It's not that live in the moment and just enjoy as much as you can, because after all you might die tomorrow. No. Live in the moment. Don't regret. You know, that's all in the past. But use as much of your energy at this moment and forever, you know, for developing Krishna consciousness. You know, and don't become. And he talks about drinking in there too, doesn't he?
He's meaning that people just like kind of like live in the future, just dreaming of thinking, you know, dreaming of things.
Materially,
material. But live in the moment for Krishna.
Hey, there's that book. Be here now. That's a good motto, especially for chanting japa. Be here now. Hare Krishna. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. I wonder where Vijay Krishna is. Now I'm worried about him when he doesn't.
No, I'm here and I have a question.
Oh, where were you? What happened? All right, go ahead.
Yes.
Is Dravida.
Prabhu, thank you very much. You're very kind. Dandavat pranams. Prabhu, related to the purport, to the shloka you chose for today, I see that Shukadeva Goswami tested the intelligence of Maharaj Pariksit, who passed the examination by refusing to accept this process as genuine, end quote. So based on this quote, my question is, you know that Krishna chanted to Arjuna that the bhakti process is joyfully performed. But as soon as someone gets to know that he's going to be tested, he becomes anxious. So how do you accommodate?
I'm sorry that your volume isn't very. It's probably not your fault. As soon as he comes to know that he'll be
tested.
Tested.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
He becomes anxious. So what kind of joyfully performed is this when it is when we are getting to know that the bhakti process is also related to being tested?
Well.
And because of being tested, becoming anxious.
Yes, but Prabhupada said that anxiety for serving Krishna is good, and you find that Srila Prabhupada often showed that anxiety when for instance, when the Bombay deities, were being threatened and so forth, and so there's when you read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, you'll see there's all these different moods, even of the pure devotees. So much anxious. Krishna, he hasn't come to the rendezvous. What's happening? This is the highest level. Radharani is wondering. And so, at the same time, when you hear that about these hells that we said, Maharaj Pariksit was very anxious for those people who were heading toward that hell. And in our own state, when we begin, we can also be anxious for that, and we want to practice really seriously and chant, But the point is that when you really take up the process, either japa, especially kirtan, you can forget all about that. Just think of the holy name. You're dancing and chanting, and then you're feasting, and all of that is auspicious, and that's why it's joyfully performed and all genuine. But the anxiety can be there when we're trying to give up bad habits and we're trying to be enthusiastic and determined and follow the program. We should have some serious gravity about that, and that's part of the mix. But at a certain point, you come to the point when you're steady in Krishna consciousness, you're on the Nishta platform, and you're tasting all rasa, and you're tasting ruchi, in the process of devotional service. And that's why Krishna says, susukam kartam abhyam. It's nicely, performed with great joy. So that's also part of it. The anxiety may be there at a certain point, but for your own advancement, and the anxiety remains forever. For the conditioned souls, that's the Shocheta, Dovamukha Cheta, Palada has shown us. But it's not the kind of debilitating anxiety that people have that just weighs them down and become depressed and become dysfunctional on the material side. But there is healthy anxiety when you're anxious to serve Krishna, or to build a temple, and do this, go out, when you go out on Harinam, or you go out on book distribution, there's a healthy kind of anxiety, So there's a mix there. It's a question of who the anxiety is for. Is it for your own sense gratification, or is it for the conditioned souls and performing your service nicely? That's the best I can do, Vijay.
Of course, Prabhu, better than best. Wonderful answer to my question as usual. And Maitreya Prabhu, he has a question. He's waiting.
Okay, this is the class after the class.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make it super quick. I have a super quick comment and a super quick question. I loved your answer to his question. When I was in school, I remember thinking that those who were in anxiety were usually the bad students. If you studied properly, you were eager to take the test and show what you had learned, or at least hoping to learn something from the test. So anyway, that's a different perspective on the testing. My question was, there's two favorite verses I have. It's the 7th of the Nectar of Instruction, Yat Krishna Nama Charita Vidya, that describes that by carefully chanting every day, a taste awakens within the tongue. And the other one is Ata Shri Krishna Namadi Baba Vaidraya Mukherjee Vaidasvayamedasparatida. Where does that verse come from? Ata Shri Krishna Namadi.
Atak Shri Krishna Namadi.
Yeah.
You know, I'm hesitant to say because I'm not positive, but I can easily research that for you, and tomorrow I'll let you know. Okay.
Okay, yeah, those two verses and verses they're like that describe how the process of very concisely describe how a taste awakens within the time.
Yeah. I always love that Syat Krishna Nama Charitarika. And then the next one, Tannama Rupa Charitarika Kirtananari, the essence of all advice. You have the 11 verses of the essential advice, and then among those, here's the essence of the essence. And then once you spend one's whole time, live in Vrindavan. If not, you can live mentally, physically, and spend one whole time hearing and chanting and glorying and tasting the nectar of Krishna kindness. And in that purport there, he quotes from Bhaktisiddhanta the different levels of absorption leading up to samadhi. It's quite a wonderful verse. Those two verses go together. Thank you for reminding of that, Maitreya Prabhu. I'll have that information tomorrow for you.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Hare Krishna. Glory to Prabhupada. I wonder if